a lot of people think life begins when you're born or conceived or whatever other answers they're coming up with these days. For some people, though, life actually begins the day a doctor tells them that if they don't make some serious changes in their lives, they're going to die. You see, my life began the morning of my 41st birthday in January of 2019. I stood staring in the mirror, looking back on my life after stepping on the scale and finding out I was over 400 pounds for the second time in my life. You know, my dad died when I was 17. So my choice was plain to see in front of me. Either I take charge of my health, make the necessary changes to live, or do nothing and die knowing that my daughter, being only 6 years old, would spend the majority of her life calling some other man daddy. Can't you see? There's no one coming to save me in this moment. It was me who had to become the hero in my story. You know, we live in a world that has a system in place to remove all accountability from every decision we ever make. Taking accountability and fixing the problem is painful. It's like a journey through the pit of hell while feeling the pain of every lost soul that resides there. But in the end, the journey becomes the foundation of your testimony. My fight has become my calling. So if you're out there struggling and you hear the sound of my voice, I'm telling you that your story is not over. As long as you have breath in your lungs, there is still time. But it's your fight, your story, your moment to stand up and do what heroes do. It's a long road ahead, and it sucks. And maybe you're thinking you can't do it. But I'm here to tell you that you have all the tools you need. You always have, and you always will, because you are enough. And most of all, you are worth it. Nobody is more capable than you. Yeah, Friday! Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you may be listening. Thanks for making me part of your day. This is episode 250 of the Ranting Weight Watcher podcast. And before we get started today, I got a couple of announcements. Listen, if you are in the Weight Watchers family and you don't have a place to go, a group of people to find support, then you want to be one place, one day of this week. And that is 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, Coach Sophie F. That's where you want to be. We're talking about a group of people who come to work every week. They show up for themselves. They show up for each other. They're doing the hard work necessary to change their lives. You could find me there if you want to hang out. Look, I'm there every week, 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, Coach Sophie F. It's a great group of people. It's a great support system. If you're looking for real support to begin your real journey, and you know what I mean, your real journey, the journey that, okay, there's a bunch of people avoiding stuff right now, and I'm talking about the real journey, the one where you get, where it becomes painful and it becomes difficult and it becomes uncomfortable. That's the real journey. If you're out there and you can't say any of that about where you're at right now, that means you can do more. You can do more, and you're just choosing not to because you don't like to be uncomfortable. But you know what? The best things come from being uncomfortable. The whole point about this journey is becoming the greatest version of yourself. And becoming the greatest version of yourself is extremely uncomfortable. So if you're interested, Coach Sophie F., 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time every Saturday morning. I want to bring some attention. I want to welcome some new followers. I made a post on Connect. That post went viral, and I have now broken into the 6,000 follower mark on WW Connect. Listen, if that brought you here, I hope it did. If seeing that post brought you to listening to this podcast or watching, whatever you're doing, welcome, welcome, welcome. Look, I've been here for 6.5 years. This podcast has existed for the last 4 years. And it stands for one reason. And that reason is to show you the truth of what it is to finally do that journey. I just told you, the real journey. The real uncomfortable journey. That's what this exists. It exists to give you hope, motivation, and inspiration, and to light a fire under your ass so that you finally get up and do what you know you've needed to do all this time. Well, with all that being said, let's get into this! Journey updates. All right, so the week of work goes from September 7th to September 13th. Total steps taken in that time, 71,410 steps. That's actually a big reduction. I mean, it's definitely lower than my norm. Average steps per day still ends up being 10,201. So look, even though the steps are lower than normal, I'm still averaging 10,000 steps a day. It's great. Again, the total miles walked is still lower than normal. 30.5 miles total for last week. That's an average miles per day of 4.3 miles per day. That is a little lower, not too much lower on the average miles per day, but definitely lower on the overall step count. On September 13th, I stepped on the scale. I currently weigh 203.2 pounds. That is a 3-pound loss. Total loss since January 2019, 192.4 pounds. We are 7.6 pounds away from my goal that I set at 6.5 years ago. I sat in that workshop just like you guys did in the studio with the clipboard in mind. And I just kept, as I'm filling out that paperwork, I just kept saying to myself, I want to lose 200 pounds and reevaluate my life. And 7.6 pounds to go. Just 6.5 years later. Listen, if anybody told you you will be 7.6 pounds away from whatever your goal is in 6.5 years, wouldn't you really make the changes necessary? I don't know how much weight you got to lose right now. I don't know what's the total, what's your goal. But if somebody can guarantee you'd be there in 6.5 years, if you just make X, Y, and Z changes in your life, would you do it? Would you do it? That's the real question. And some of you might be out there thinking, oh, that's 6.5 years. That's too long for what I got to lose. Okay. It's too long. You know, when you look around society, we've created such amazing things. I sit here at a desk with computers, with screens, with cameras and microphones and all kinds of equipment, lighting. And that's only the beginning. I mean, cell phones, telephones, internet, all of these things. It's endless. The amount of things that have been created by man since the beginning of humanity. Since the beginning of humanity. The amount of things we created. It's endless. In spite of all that, In spite of how much intellect it took to create all of these things, there's one thing I could say about humanity. Humanity is wasteful, extremely wasteful. And I'm not talking about the environment and taking care of the environment. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about how wasteful we are. But the thing is, regardless of how intelligent, regardless of the ingenuity and the determination of all these things that it took to create these amazing inventions that have greatly improved and greatly deteriorated society. Because you look, everything's a double-edged sword. You heard me say that. But in spite of all that, there's one thing no one has figured out how to create. No one. That one thing, time. We can't build it. We can't create it. Nobody has figured out how to create it. As a matter of fact, they can tell you one thing. We're all here for a certain amount of time. And nobody knows how much time that is. Nobody knows. We're here for this mysterious number in the amount of time that we're all going to be here. And we walk through life, and the number one thing, and I'm saying it, I'm blanket statement, and I'm included. The one thing all of us, every last one of us, wastes is time. We walk around like we got time to spend. We walk around like we got nothing but time. We walk around like time is meaningless. We got all the time in the world to do whatever we want. We waste time like it's our part-time job. We waste time like we get paid extra to waste it. Although, in spite of the fact that nobody knows how long they have. Nobody knows how long they have. It's amazing when you think about it like that, right? When you see the perspective, when you look at it from a 40,000 foot view or whatever. We don't know how to create it. There's nobody figured that out. We can't stop it. It just keeps ticking. Yeah, it's the one thing we care the least about. There's gold, there's diamonds, we care about all of these things more than the one thing we can't create. If you knew where to go and be a miner, you would be able to mine gold from somewhere, right? You would be able to. But time is no big deal. It's the one thing we can't make, and it's the least valuable thing in the back of everybody's head. Isn't that crazy? Does that even make sense? Does it make sense to anyone that I'm saying this? And look, if any one of you can refute what I'm saying, if you look at society as a whole, and you know what? We're defined by our majority. So you don't mess with me sending me messages about, oh, not everyone's like that. I don't care. Overall, society as a whole, you're defined by your majority, no matter how much you don't like that. And the one thing, and it doesn't matter, men, women, all of it, all of us, all we do is waste time. All we do. We waste years and years and years creating a situation where you don't care about the result, right? So whatever the circumstance, right? There's plenty of reasons people became unhealthy, okay? Plenty of reasons, and the reasons you became unhealthy are only important in reality to the person who became unhealthy, right? Because they want to be able to explain how hard their life was. When they want to explain why they're in the position they're in. They would go above and beyond to explain away why things are the way they are. They didn't care for 1 second that whatever their circumstance was, they were creating an even bigger problem that they would have to deal with later. And that's not, I mean, that's literally across the board. No one thinks about the consequences of the things they do in the moment that they're doing them. And then when it comes time to pay the consequences, very few, very few actually own it. Very few actually own it. There are people out there still talking about what happened 30 and 40 and 50 years ago to make this. Whatever traumatic event that was. And I'm not downplaying it, but at some point in the history of your life, you could say you have lived longer after it than you did before it, right? You see what I'm saying? So at some point, could you also say that you're starting to hold on voluntarily to the anchor that is the trauma that created the problem? Everybody loves the idea of a solution, but nobody wants to do the hard work necessary to fix it. Right now, in the United States, I mean, I know I have listeners all over the world, but in the United States, the average life expectancy in the United States is 76 years old. We're at this point, we have generations that are expected to live shorter lives than their parents. We have developed poor habits at a level you can't even measure anymore. And the desire to fix them is limited by your desire to remain comfortable in the situation. I've told you guys many times that what's the word? The WW system gives you guidelines. And those guidelines get you to a certain point, right? Now, most people would call this point a plateau. And they think if I just hang here long enough, eventually I break the plateau. Okay. I don't see it that way. I don't know that I've ever seen it that way. I told you guys I have compared this journey to an Olympic event, the hurdles. Like any event in the Olympics, that especially the hurdles in the Olympics, the only difference between what this journey is and the hurdles is that you can get up and keep running and get to the second hurdle, right? So if I trip, fall on my face on hurdle number 1, I can get up, keep running, and get to hurdle number 2. But in becoming healthy, of the healthiest version of yourself, or the best version of yourself, however you want to word that, you never get to hurdle number 2. You just keep restarting the race until you're able to clear hurdle number 1 over and over and over again. The minute you clear hurdle number 1, you're on your way to hurdle number 2. That's when the journey gets harder. At some point, so you start using the points as guidelines, you start using 0-point foods as a way to stay satiated, you start doing all of these things, try to make better choices, do some research about recipes, you make all these changes. And these changes eventually get you over hurdle number 1. And depending on your situation, maybe they even get you over hurdle number 2, hurdle number 3, right? Eventually, everything slows down. Everything comes to a halt. And there's a bunch of people who start asking questions in workshops about it. And the natural answers are typically very vague. Oh, you got to change things up. You got to do things, but it's never solid, right? Obviously, you need to change things up. But the real question is, you've gotten to this far. And look, we have to see the whole thing for what it is. When you signed up for the Weight Watchers membership, you sacrificed your money. You sacrificed your time going to workshops, whatever you're doing. And you sacrificed some things that you ate. Now, they obviously tell you everything's on the table. So you found ways to keep things on the table. And if obviously that meant I can't eat these as often as I used to because they don't fit. I could do special things on special nights and make sure that I have them once in a while. But in other words, even though you didn't give them up entirely, you gave them up the majority. If you compare your old life, your pre-WW life, to the current WW life, you could say that I no longer eat this way, right? If I went and got McDonald's for dinner 7 days a week, maybe 2 years in, I'm doing it 2 days a week. You understand? I'm still having it. So sacrifice doesn't mean the same thing all the time, does it? But I recognized somewhere along the line, and I never ate McDonald's 7 days a week. So I'm just saying it as an example. But at some point along the line, I recognized, obviously, I can't eat this 7 days a week anymore. Now I had to make things different. So I made a sacrifice. Even though you don't like that word, even though you don't think that was necessarily a sacrifice, it was. I call a spade a spade. If you used to eat something on a daily basis, let me give you an example. Before I moved to Florida. Before that I was on WW. But before so many things. When I was, easily in the 400-pound range in Stamford, Connecticut, there's this little place, and it's called the Wedge Inn. And I called there so often that I would just say, "Hey, it's Don." And like, "Okay, we got you. Be here in like 10 minutes. It'll be ready." That's how often I was calling. And every time I called, I got the same thing. On a sub roll, on a hero, whatever you want to call it. In Connecticut, we call them wedges, right? So that's the foot-long wedge, whatever. The sub, the hero, the grinder, whatever you want to call it. Because I know all over the country, they call that piece of bread something different everywhere. But in Connecticut, they call it a wedge. And I would get the same exact thing every time. Bacon, egg, cheese, sausage, bacon, egg, cheese, chili, and home fries in the bread, inside. Again, sausage, bacon, egg, cheese, chili, home fries on the bread. And I would get that so often that I was on first name basis. "Hey, it's Don. Be here in 10 minutes, Don. It'll be ready for you." That's how often I ordered it. I told you guys last week I'm a sandwich guy. That was my favorite sandwich. It was like 3 eggs on the bread. The guy would put the home fries first. He'd put the chili on top of the home fries. This way the oil from the chili would go into the home fries. He'd throw the eggs on top, the cheese on top, and then he would put the bacon and the sausage and a little more chili. Ask me how often I eat that sandwich now. I mean, let alone the fact that there's not a single sub place in Florida, in the state of Florida, that is using bread that would be able to withstand a sandwich like that. It's all too soft here. They don't know about the crusty, the firm bread. It's firm and crusty on the outside, but soft on the inside. The one that could withstand the amount of stuff you're throwing in there. They don't know about that in Florida. But in the end, there had to be a realization, right? I can't eat like this if I expect to ever say I lost 200 pounds and got to the position to reevaluate my life. That had to be success. That and many other things had to be sacrificed. And when I started the journey, I generally concentrated on the things I knew I would like that were point friendly. Instead of concentrated on what I couldn't eat anymore from my old life, I concentrated on creating a list of food in my new life that I enjoyed that were point friendly. That worked until it didn't. I lost 50 pounds just making those changes. And then I had to add exercise. Could I run 5 miles? Could I walk 4 miles a day on that day? No. But I could walk 20 minutes. And I could walk that 20 minutes 3 days a week. And I could walk that 20 minutes 3 days a week for 8 weeks straight. That's what I did. 20 minutes a day, 3 days a week, 8 weeks. And before I knew it, in the blink of an eye, 8 weeks is gone. And I could look back on the last 8 weeks and said, I successfully did that. I walked for 20 minutes a day, 3 days a week for the last 8 weeks. That's success. Because why? Because I said I would do it. I said I would do it, and 8 weeks later, I'm looking back, and I could say I did it. That's success. And then I say, well, what am I doing for the next 8 weeks? Not only do I have to maintain what I created, but I have to add more. So we say, okay, if we could do 20 minutes 3 days a week, we could do 30 minutes 3 days a week. And that went on for the next 8 weeks. And at the end of that 8 weeks, 16 weeks in, I'm looking at nothing but success. And I wasn't strict and it said it had to be Monday, Wednesday, Friday. No, it just had to be 3 of the 7 days. I allowed for flexibility. I allowed for the possibility that something would not work out on any particular day. If it ended up happening Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, it was still 3 days. And before I knew it, 16 weeks in, I'm making changes again. I'm going to say 4 days a week, 30 minutes for the next 8 weeks. And then before I knew it, the 30 minutes became 45. And then the 4 days became 5. It only built. And at some point, it stopped being minutes and it started being miles. Wherever you're at, there's a way to get to where you want to be. You just have to be willing to make the sacrifices to get there. Every step along this journey, when things start to slow down, that is your journey telling you it's time. It's time to make a sacrifice. And if you really love yourself, if you really believe you can do the things you're going to do, you make the next sacrifice. But we don't. We sit in workshops filled with people that will easily make you feel comfortable right exactly where you are. Will talk you out of whatever you're feeling. Make you feel warm and fuzzy, and you never actually challenge yourself. We do all of this avoiding the sacrifices we know we need to make. Half of you guys listening to me know you have food issues. No. And you fancy up the vocabulary. I'm an emotional eater. I have a sweet tooth. No, you have a food addiction. You make it sound cute when you tell the story. And you do everything, and because there's a bunch of other people in the exact same boat as you, who are they to tell you stop saying it like that? See it for what it is. But someone like me can. Someone who went through the fire can. They can look at you and say, until you do this, nothing will ever change. And you could take that and you could be offended. Or you can take that and transform your life. And for the people that continually just go through the motions, sit on that hamster wheel, running in and getting nowhere, just wasting the time away. Time you don't know you have. Let's take that into perspective for a minute. I told you just a few minutes ago, the average life expectancy in this country right now is 76 years old. How far are you from 76? How far? How much time do you really have left? Now there's a bunch of you saying, well, I wouldn't have that much time left. I might as well do whatever I want to do. I can't stop you from thinking that. All I can tell you is, yeah, it might be 76. But if you make some changes, what if that turns to 86? If you make a lot of changes, what if that turns to 96? If you go extreme and make all the sacrifices necessary? What if it turns to 106? And what if you're healthier at 106 than you were at 76? Or at 60 even? What if? I'm going to tell some real truth right now. I'm going to tell some real truth. Of the audience that listens to me, that answered the question in whatever app they use to listen to the podcast, to watch the podcast. Actually, YouTube is not included in these numbers. Literally every other app except YouTube. 60% of my audience is 60 or older. 60%. 34% are 45 or older. And the numbers get really small after that. But I'm concentrated on those two large numbers. Over 80% of my audience is 45 or older. How much time are you wasting? How much time don't you know you have? You think Charlie Kirk knew that he was going to talk to some students and at 31 years old, he'd be dead? Think he knew that? You think he'd leave the house if he knew that? You wouldn't leave the house if you knew that, regardless of your age. If someone said to you, if you leave the house today, you're going to get shot and killed, would you leave the house? And yet, someone like me stands at a microphone like this week after week and says, make the sacrifices and become the greatest version of yourself, because now more than ever, in this world, in 2025, it is absolutely necessary. And instead you say, oh, I got time. He's being extreme. I just can't let go of these things. I need these things in my life. If I let go of those things, I'm going to binge eat. And you'll never make the connection. You'll never make the connection that eating those foods consistently day after day will still end up being more than the few times you'll binge. That's what you've told yourself. You told yourself, as long as I keep it in my life, I won't binge. And you act like binging would look, there's 365 days in a year. However many days you spend eating those things, if you compare that to how many days you would have binged, I guarantee you it's not 365. And I guarantee you it will not allot to the same amount of calories, the same amount of points, the same amount of food, no matter how many times you binge, by eating it consistently. What do I say all the time? What you do consistently basically dictates your results. I say that all the time. But we waste time. We act like we have all the time in the world. And we act like I'm crazy for being as urgent as I am in 2025. Right around you as you speak, a world is being created where you are the dependent. AI is going to wipe out thousands of jobs that humans used to do. And they'll talk about a universal income. A universal income. Everybody needs a universal income, because AI took all the jobs. And will some jobs be created because of AI? Sure. But it'll eliminate far more than it creates. So if you're dependent on a universal income in a world filled with greed, what's the likelihood you're going to have quality food? Can you not see the way the world is being molded to eat? Can you not see it? The instant processed bullshit that we put in our mouths, and really what it really is poison. It's a lab-created poison that's killing you very slowly over a very long period of time. Slowly enough that you never suspect it. But now, because you're dependent on a universal basic income, they can say, well, did you do this? Well, you don't get your universal basic income. So you see, you become dependent in many more ways than just financially. Many more ways. And the urgency for you to take charge of the simplest of things, like your health right now, is so much more important than anybody perceives it to be in their mind. Instead, they fill their time with scrolling on social media, with Netflix, the endless streaming apps. They fill all of their time. And at the end of the day, like, oh, I don't have time to do this. I don't have time to do that. Yeah, well, maybe we should look at your cell phone and see what the screen time is in the settings. Maybe we might just find the time you're looking for. Or maybe you just don't want to. Maybe this is real evidence of people just aren't willing to do the necessary thing, to make the necessary sacrifice to become the greatest version of themselves. There's a lot of emphasis on time being short. And if you ever want to freak yourself out, you'll open the Bible to Matthew chapter 24, when Jesus is talking about what will the end time be like. And if you honestly can't look at the words written there and see that happening in 2025, then you are allowed to live in your delusion. Because it's literally impossible to not see many of the things stated in that chapter. And we waste time on social media. We waste time on streaming apps. We waste and we waste and we waste our life away. Where the simplest of things, like taking charge of your health, can prepare you for what is to come. Because taking charge of your health creates discipline. And discipline is needed for many things. And if you are successful in creating the discipline to live a healthy life, then you could take what you've learned and apply that to build discipline in other areas of your life, including your spiritual life. The last 6.5 years taught me one thing. Everything I learned to create discipline for my health can easily be applied for discipline in a spiritual relationship with God. I have to be willing to make the sacrifices necessary to die the life that I love to the life that I want. The same thing I did to die to my desire for food and my desire for health. It's not impossible. It is very possible. Everything is possible. But it starts with the action, a step in faith. A step in faith that says, okay, I don't walk at all. But I know I can walk 3 days a week. I know it. I know out of those 3 days, I can walk 20 minutes. And I know I can do it for the next 8 weeks. That's faith. And then, following that is action. Action. Because your words with no action, they're just words. And we know what words mean in 2025. We've heard countless politicians say so many words and say nothing at the same time. So how long are you going to be just like them, saying a whole bunch of word salad and creating nothing? Creating no results? That choice is yours. When are you going to decide you're finally willing to make the sacrifices necessary to do the simplest of the tasks? And believe me, becoming healthy is hard. But when it comes after that, it's far more difficult. And you're going to look at what you did to become healthy and you say, well, that was easy compared to this. This world in 2025, it's only the beginning of how miserable it's going to become. And it could be a great place or it can be a miserable existence just by the simple choices you're making right now. The decisions that mean nothing right now. Because, hey, well, who doesn't want to have this? Oh, what's the big deal if I have this or that and this and that? All these little choices that seem like they're nothing, they end up being everything at the end of it all. Because that what becomes the foundation for everything else. And if you can't win at this, you can't win at any of it. It's time to get serious. It's time to do what's necessary. I love each and every one of you. God bless you all.